Hi, my name is Charles Traylor, and I'm general manager of a company called Archline.com. That's a wide area network of architects and engineers who come together on an as-need basis over the internet to provide AutoCAD and Revit working drawings for other architects. And back in the early years of the 21st century, the 2001, 2002 era, when I was still mostly using CAD and Revit collaborators in the United States, I was running into some difficulty as far as what you might call collective bargaining, and that the collaborators were gradually doing less and less for more and more. At the same time, my architect clients were tending to agree to pay me less and less. So I was getting squeezed from the point of view of having to pay more and earn less. And it was getting critical. I had to do something, or at some point or another, I wouldn't have a business anymore. And as I mentioned in my last video, I had started exploring the possibilities of hiring collaborators from other countries. And one of the things I ran into in making exploration of the availability of people is that their rates of compensation varied significantly depending on what country they were with. And it all really kind of fell into two categories of compensation. We had the countries that have mature industrialized economies where the compensation was pretty much what it was in the United States, and then other countries that still had developing economies, and the compensation was much lower, and sometimes it's much lower. And so what I found is the rates of compensation in the developing countries were maybe 50% or less than what I'd have to pay for comparable people here in the United States. And since I've been giving skills tests, I could determine that some of them actually had capabilities were comparable with the people that were working for me here. But I hadn't really made a move at that point to use any of them yet. Was concerned about my local people, but I hadn't really done anything about it. And then there came a point on one of our larger projects. We were about 2 weeks out from the deadline, and one by one, everybody that was working on the team for that project, there's about a half a dozen of them, began to let me know that they had one reason or another why they wouldn't be able to be working for the last week or so of the deadline because of commitments that they had in their personal lives or things that had come up unexpectedly. And I could see in the past, that this sort of thing had popped up here and there occasionally, and it would affect one or two members of my team, but it never really did threaten the ability to deliver a project on a particular deadline. In this particular instance, one by one, everybody on the whole team bowed out. And I suddenly found myself a week out, maybe 10 days out, and nobody available to finish the project. And so I was really kind of forced into trying to do something. And of course, I had these people that I had contact information with. I mean, some of them were as far away as Africa and Asia. And I really hesitated to do business with anybody I hadn't met, although in each instance, the people I've been doing business with in the United States were people I'd never met. And so there were a group of about 6 of them down in Monterrey, Mexico, who were, in addition to being architects, they were instructors at a local technical institute down there. And I decided, well, I'm going to get on a plane, I'm going to go down there to meet them before I turn them loose onto a project for me. And my son Greg at the time, who has a degree in architecture from the University of Texas at Arlington, was working with me, and he was doing some work with me on this particular project, as a matter of fact. And I invited him to go with me, and so we set a time to go down there. And I was really kind of hesitant about all this because although my wife and I had made several trips to Mexico as tourists in the past, I didn't know really what I'd be facing going down there to attempt to do business, and I just had no idea. So I was kind of buckling on ahead into territory I didn't know anything about. Well, the last day before we went, Greg called up and said, I'm hesitant too, Pop. He said, I really don't want to go. And so he backed out, and I had to go down there all by myself. And the flight down to Mexico was uneventful. It was a direct flight from Dallas to Monterrey. And I had arranged with one of the architects on the team of about, as I mentioned, about 6 people to meet me at the airport. And when I got there, the airport was just alive with crowds and traffic and people moving around. And I went to the appointed place where my architect contact was going to be, and he wasn't there. And all of a sudden, the airport just emptied out. It was empty. And I was there all by myself, and it was hot. And the airport wasn't really that big, and so I walked from one end of the airport to the other, and I thought, my God, I'm down here, and I've got a reservation to fly back, but it's not going to be for several hours, and where is this guy? And so I kind of almost went into a panic mode, and just about the time that I was worried about as much as I could be about the situation, the guy showed up, and everything was okay. And we went on into Monterey and went to an office building where his colleagues were gathered. And we sat down, had a nice conversation, and I asked him a few questions about the jargon and the tools and tips of the trade, and they all seemed to be pretty familiar with everything that I was interested in. And so we arranged that I would communicate with this one guy that was more or less the leader and the spokesman for the group, and all of my communications would go through him, and he would distribute all the work that had to be done to the other 5 members of the team. And that when they submitted invoices, that the invoices all come through him, and then I would pay him, and he would pay them. And that all seemed well and good. And I got on a plane and flew back to Dallas. And instead of preparing red lines and notes and instructions and so on for my team in the United States, I diverted everything to go down to Monterrey, Mexico. And they turned out everything fine. They finished on time. The pricing for the work was half what I had to pay in the United States. And we looked like we were on a road to success. And after they'd been working for me for, I guess, a month or so, I began to realize that, hey, they weren't working nearly as fast or as efficiently now as they had been when we first signed up. And it just didn't seem to matter what I did. They started going slower and slower, and deadlines began to either not really get missed, but we were really getting close to the deadlines, and I was concerned. And I asked my contact about it, and he said, well, it's just not working as fast as I had been. So I had contact information for the other people on the team, and called one of them and found out that the leader that I'd been paying hadn't been paying everybody else. And so essentially he was trying to do all the work all by himself because nobody else would work if they weren't getting paid. Well, that didn't look like that was going to have a much of a future, and I was looking around for other options. And while they had been working for me, I had been running an ad in a classified outlet for the American Institute of Architects, and of course those ads were going out to architects all over the world. And a young lady from Argentina contacted me and was wondering about the possibilities of doing work for me, and I gave her one of our skills tests, and she did well on it. And I thought, well, I'm going to give her just a little bit. I can't really justify going all the way down to Buenos Aires, Argentina to meet this young lady. I'm just going to try her sight unseen and see what happens. So I gave her a wall section, and she spit it back accurately, quickly, and I thought, well, this looks pretty good. So I gave her a whole wall, excuse me, a whole sheet of wall sections, and she spit that back. Good price, good time. And we had enough work going at the time that even as promising as she looked, there was too much work for her to do by herself. So I asked her, do you have any friends? And she said, well, sure. And I said, you have very many? She said, I can get pretty much as many people as you want. And she said, I know a lot of architects, a lot of friends of mine, classmates that I went to school with, and they're all right here in Buenos Aires. And so I said, well, start lining them up for me. So one by one, I started hearing from several other architects. All of them were women. And so I went from having an all-male team in the United States to having an all-female team down in Buenos Aires, which was interesting. And they were good. They met all our deadlines, and there was no concern about rates of compensation. Met all our deadlines, and we worked together for many years after that. So I'm going to tell you in some of the upcoming videos about some of the constraints that we began to run into with my international enterprise and the difficulties of securing new work. And in the meantime, if you think you'd like to look at the possibilities of our doing some work together, give me a call at 214-304-2850, or send me an email at archline@archline.com. Call me any time of the day or night, any time of the week, the month, or the year. I pretty well work around the clock, 24/7, 365. Thanks a lot. I look forward to hearing from you.